Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Our Sedra is Pinchas, Numbers chapter 25, verse 10 and following. As we enter this week's conversation, I welcome you into one of the most morally complex stories in the entire Torah. And that says a lot. Here we are in the 40th year of the wilderness wandering, and the Israelites still somehow can't escape the allure of both foreign women and idolatry, and sometimes both together. It seems that our people, despite the crossing of the Red Sea and all of the events that occurred at Sinai, had developed a learning curve that was astonishingly close to being a flat line. 40 years, rebellions and punishments, impatience and punishments, ingratitude and punishments, arrogance and punishments. 40 years, a new generation of Israelites, and they have learned close to nothing. There's been some mixing with the Moabites or Midianites, we're not quite sure which, following the encounter with Balaam. Because of that mixing, some truly disgusting things were occurring, capped off by the son of an Israelite notable, a man named Zimri, who nonchalantly engaged in public sexual play with a Midianite woman named Cosby. C-O-Z, not C-O-S-B-Y. God was outraged. Moses was outraged. A punitive plague moved through the Israelite camp, killing thousands. The people were devastated. And that was precisely when Pinchas, who was the grandson of Aaron, picked up his spear and brutally slaughtered both Zimri and Cosby. Now let's just see how the Peshat, the literal text, what the Torah itself says, how it deals with this event. Amazingly, God seems pleased with Pinchas and with his murderous act of vengeance. Way to go, Pinchas. The devastating plague is now called off, and Pinchas was rewarded with a Brit Shalom. We'll get back to what that means later on, a covenant of peace. We'll get back to it. Pinchas' descendants are now promised a status la'olam, for all eternity, forever, as Kohanim. It might even be, scholars tell us, that this story is a foundational story for why the members of the tribe of Levi were granted the honor of being hereditary Kohanim and Leviim, Levites, for the Jewish people. It seems, the Pshat, it seems that the God of Sinai really likes bloody vengeance. Now, another member of the tribe of Levi was previously involved with a killing driven by passion. Do you remember the event? Who? Yes, good. Moses encountered an Egyptian overseer who was brutally beating an Israelite slave, and Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, killed that Egyptian and then fled for his life into the Sinai desert. And now an additional reference, far more obscure. Do you remember the judge Jephthah? The story is told in the book of Judges. Jephthah took a note to God that if God allowed Jephthah to lead the Israelite army victoriously in a battle against its enemies, then Jephthah would sacrifice to God the first living being that he would see when he returns home. Jephthah and his army won, and Jephthah ends up killing his own daughter so as to honor his vow to God. 3 killings portrayed in the Bible as somehow being acts of honor. Rabbi Shai Held, a wonderful contemporary scholar, describes these events as metastases of zealotry, meaning most literally, incidents of cancerous behavior run wild. There is no doubt that there are those in any religious community that take the Hebrew Bible seriously who will choose to so interpret the Bible's praise for Pinchas's extra legal killing, for Moses' killing of the Egyptian, and for Jephthah's murder of his own daughter as being divine mandates for bloody religious zealotry. The rabbinic commentators cannot obliterate the pshat, the sacred text indication of divine approval. So Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, 19th century, felt moved to reinterpret that phrase that we mentioned earlier, Brit Shalom, covenant of peace. Instead of following the usual path of saying that God rewarded Pinchas and his descendants with that eternal covenant of peace, Berlin suggested that God gave Pinchas and his family a way of calming down, of soothing their penchant for violent behavior initiated by intense emotionality. The religious zealot family is blessed with a method, a Brit Shalom, by which each member can pour cooling water over their flaming passions. I didn't say Xanax, but whatever. Other modern commentators were equally worried about the behavior of Pinchas's descendants, their inherited volcanic rage in defense of the worship of God. Inherited rage. Rabbi Shmuel Benjamin Sofer was concerned that the descendants of Pinchas will never be able to relate to other Jewish people in their status being Kohanim if they cannot put limits to their zealotry. Leaders must have a clear sense of mission. Leaders must certainly have what would appear to be an endless passion to achieve their goals, but true leaders must also know how to guide and to direct their passions in a way that don't bring chaos and destruction in their wake. Too much Pinchas-like behavior can tear down the most beautiful of worlds. It's fascinating that some other commentators just don't believe that anything can really curb and redirect the flaming passion of religious zealots. Menachem Mendel of Kotz taught that Pinchas was intended to be, destined to be, Moses' successor, not Joshua, Pinchas. According to Menachem Mendel, Moses himself had expected that Pinchas would succeed him. But after this incident, Moses praised Pinchas, but stated that religious zealots must never be allowed to lead a people. So Pinchas received the equivalent of the Jewish people's highest honor, Medal of Honor, but then he was sidelined. The last thing that a people needs is mindless passion in their leader. A Midrash goes even further, and what is really a fantasy expansion of our text. Pinchas was the high priest during the time when Jephthah felt driven to fulfill his vow to kill his own daughter. Now, Jephthah could have asked Pinchas to relieve the power of the vow. High priest, he could do that. Pinchas could have released Jephthah on his own from the vow. But both men proved stubborn, unmovable, and guided by a cruel, rigid morality that refused to seek or to accept mitigation. A horrible picture of egos run wild. Pinchas the hero now begins to emerge as a man of such passion that he had no room for human compassion. According to our tradition, both Pinchas and Jephthah died terrible deaths. Our takeaways here are obvious. There is a clear red line between a driving passion to do that which is asserted to be right and granting oneself somehow permission to pursue the noblest of goals in the most inhumane ways. This must be what is meant when we are taught Lo hamidrashi kar ela hamaseh. What matters more than all that we have studied, all that we have absorbed through living, all of the values that we hold tightly to our chest, is how we go about bringing those values to life, expressing them, modeling them, living them. Zealotry and jealousy, zealousness and jealousness sound a great deal alike in English. Rabbi held notes. But when zealotry metastasizes into behavior that knows no boundaries, into actions that intentionally set aside and stomp upon the noblest of human values, then what started out so well, unfailingly, will have a bleak and destructive ending. What we do must reflect who we are. What we do must reflect who we are. And who and what we are must match up with those values and moral choices that demonstrate our own best hope for humankind. Okay? Have a wonderful Shabbat and a wonderful weekend. Please remember, hit share so as to invite others into this expanding conversation. Shabbat Shalom.